Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hardpoints, the podcast about energy security and the startup economy, of course, how they all intersect, shape the world around us. Each week, as usual, we unpack the real dynamics behind the headlines, what's changing, what it means, and why it matters to you. Thanks for being here. Neal, it's good to see you.
Yeah, man, it's been a week. You've been gone off in the backwoods. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I reconnected with nature and disconnected from the internet, and so that was awesome.
Yeah,
It was really good
tell
time.
me more. Tell me what that's like.
Yeah, so we as we've talked about before, my wife's mother died here earlier this year, and we'd planned a kind of a family reunion for this last week. So normally, like when we go backpacking, it's like, where can we drive to from Denver, get to the trailhead, get in, on the first day, et cetera. But since we had like this family reunion of time that Lindsay had already kind of requested off, we were like, you know what, let's make a trip of this. So we ended up driving down to Durango, spent a night in Durango, which is about 6.5 hours from Denver. So it's still in Colorado, but it's, it's about as far from Denver as you can get in Colorado and still be in Colorado. And spent the night there. And then we took the train in from Durango into the backcountry. They have this train, this old like narrow gauge railroad, the Durango and Silverton route, that goes up to like an old mining town kind of up in the mountains called Silverton. And so you can put your pack on the train, and 3 hours later they stop in the woods and you get your happy butt off and you go for a hike. So that's what we did. We spent 3 nights, 4 days out in the San Juans, kind of in the Elk Creek drainage area, went up to the Vestal Basin. Kids did awesome. It was that run into the Vestal Basin, like, it's not that far from the Elk Creek drainage. It's only like 2.5 miles in, something like that. But it is as technical and as hard of backpacking, I think, as you can do, and still call it backpacking. We ended up crossing almost 80 like downed logs. Like some of them were like pretty major, having to like scramble around them or over and under them. Like 60-degree slopes, all sorts of, loose gravel. Like it was pretty technical. I mean, it took us about 4 hours of hiking to go that 2.5 miles, just to tell you how tough it was. Got up there. There was only like 2 other guys in the camping and kind of in the basin area there. And they came over and they're like, wow, good job, guys, getting up here. We don't normally see families up here. So it was really cool.
That's awesome. Did how long did that take? Is that a day or?
So we did 1 day into kind of like this area called like the Beaver Pond area, and then we did another day up to the Vestal Basin, and then we backtracked over the next 2 days. So it's kind of fun, you caught the train on the way out there as well, because we had to catch a train, which was kind of weird. So we got back early, and then we ended up swimming in the Animas River for about an hour to kind of like cool off and
nice.
So yeah, it was just kind of great. San Juans are gorgeous mountains. We ended up after we got back down into Durango, we drove something they call the Million Dollar Highway, US Route 550, and it goes from Durango through Silverton and then back up to Ouray, which is spelled Ouray. And just a phenomenal road, really, really beautiful. So yeah, man, it was
Very cool.
It was a fun like Southwest Colorado trip.
And you checked your email every morning, caught up fully, and stayed connected with the team?
No, of course not. So there was a little bit of like, okay, guys, let's see, see you later. What was interesting was, and this is just a change, I'm starting to show how fucking old I am, is that people were like, wait, you don't have a sat phone? And I was like, no, that's the whole point of backpacking, is you're supposed to go without it. And like everybody had some sort of communication device. So there's a new one there, but I think I will not bring anything that's email connected ever. So I know that much.
Yeah, I did on my last sailing trip. We went sailing. We got Starlink, and it was, a couple of hours of staying plugged in. But, that wasn't a full recharge. I mean, I had to do it because it was sort of in the middle of fundraising, and I just couldn't stop. But I appreciate that you took a minute to actually disconnect. It's really good, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Speaking of fundraising, how's that going for you, man?
Good. I mean, look, it is, goal is 5. We've got 4 or 5 committed, which is very healthy at this stage of the game. I'm expecting term sheets in the next week or two. I think we're looking really good. You got to get across the finish line, but especially, I mean, anytime to be able to say what I just said is a great thing, but especially in this environment where there's so much trepidation about the broader economy, VC's in kind of a weird spot. Anything to do with energy is in a weird spot. I feel really, really good about where we are.
That's amazing. That many people committed, like that's phenomenal. Actually, congratulations.
Well, as they say, don't no congratulations until the check clears in the bank account, right? Like I'm not there yet, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's not real until the money is in the account, but still, that's awesome, dude. Congrats.
Yeah, thanks.
So, no, I won't say congrats. I will say I'm excited for you. How about that?
Thank you. I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, well, good. Did you do anything else in the week while I was out gallivanting in the woods?
Nothing happened. I just waited for you to get back. I'm just kidding.
Most people.
No, man.
I'm not even sure my wife waits for me.
Yep. Fair. Yeah, no, it was good. Like, last week I went to Austin, was there for, we joined Capital Factory, which is a sort of incubator, startup lab, angel network. It's a bunch of different things in the middle of Austin. It's sort of the center of the the Austin startup scene. And we joined and really glad we did. It was a really good experience. I spent Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday there getting to know the team, getting to know, we came in together with a cohort of other companies, got to know those folks. And really, they're co-located with the Defense Innovation Unit, which is how the U.S. military is trying to get closer to early stage tech. I got to meet some folks from Army Futures Command and other organizations like that. And I got to pitch, which, it's always fun to stand up in front of a couple hundred people and tell them about what you're up to. So all of that was, challenging, fun, exhausting, and I think ultimately productive. So, I flew back Friday and went right to another sort of DC event. Like when you're fundraising, it's like nonstop, go to everything, meet everybody, try to, I just got done saying we're in a really good spot, but I'm still hustling. Until it's done, it's not done.
Yeah, you run all the way through the tape, man. You can't stop until the race is done.
Yeah. So that's my mindset. I mean, I hate to say it, but I actually worked a significant piece of the weekend too, because that's what startup CEOs do. But until, I said this to my wife over the weekend. It's like, I have a job. I've got to make sure the company is like chugging along, but now I've got this other job, which is fundraising, and it's more or less layered right on top. So, I'm excited to get this chapter behind us, sign that customer, which is still in work. And once we get that done, maybe I'll take a deep breath, and maybe then I'll go on a camping trip and not take my Starlink with me.
There you go. Be a good winter camping trip. You'll really enjoy the isolation.
Fair enough.
Yeah. No. We Austin's kind of an interesting place. It's been years and years since I was down there. I went through flight school down in Corpus Christi, and we used to. Corpus was one of the most fun times of my life, and it was mainly because we had like a really cloudy flight school, and I had a roommate with a boat. So when you're in early stages of flight school, you can't fly through a cloud. The joke is that you'll explode or whatever, but because you're not instrument qualified. And so we were like, oh, no, bummer, it's cloudy. Let's drop the boat in the water and go wakeboarding. So we did that so much while we were there, but then we would also run up on the weekends to like Austin or San Antonio or something like that. But we ended up recently getting a customer in the Austin area, Circuit of the Americas. It's the Formula One race.
Cool.
So
okay.
really, it's kind of fun. Like one of the things that's been fun about Acclimate is that we're starting to become like the company for people that want to take care of climate or work on climate, but don't want to be climate people necessarily. So like climate's important to them, but it's not the central part of their brand. And I kind of dig that, man. Like that's kind of part of our charter.
I love that. Actually, let me ask you a question. So I was at this party in LA on Friday that I raced back to, and I met a founder who's working on not carbon account. What he says is he's like working on the S and the G of ESG. And he's like not doing carbon accounting, but really trying to help companies, small and medium companies, which is why I thought of you. And I gave him your info. Small and medium sized companies try to uncover like the S and the G, the social and governance of their supply chains. So, what I said was like, I think Acclimate does certainly focus on E, but do you do the S and the G?
No,
Okay.
no. We've the S and the G tends to be historically when people. So ESG, for those that are listening along, is environmental, social, and governance, and people have been focusing on that for a while. The general idea behind ESG is that it's supposed to like de-risk things. That if you have good environmental, social, and governance practices with your company, it won't blow up. So, if you have good governance, you're going to make sure that you don't have a CEO that's, banging the HR director at a Coldplay concert, because that's going to, be really hard on the valuation of your company, right? And so they focus on that. Historically, the E was kind of the technical side, and the S and the G were more kind of the soft skills, making sure you had policies and procedures, et cetera, in place. And so a lot of companies, in my experience, really focused on the S and the G stuff because it was just an easier lift. You just wrote a policy and got people to sign off on it, and then you did a little bit of training, and then you had a reason to fire an employee if they were misbehaving or something, right? So, and the social side of it became a little bit harder when you start looking into your supply chains, focusing on, do they have human rights abuses, et cetera, right? And so there's that kind of mix there. So the S becomes a little bit harder there, but the E was always kind of where the rubber met the road when it came to, how do you quantify your carbon footprint? That can be laborious. How do you do anything to change it? And historically, the biggest problem is that ESG directors just haven't been empowered to actually make a whole lot of changes. They can just make reports and goals, but they aren't really, from an environmental standpoint or from a social standpoint, you have to be able to give real teeth to procurement. And it needs to be something more than a box check of like, we will not buy from you if you do not have this, rather than like, you'll become a preferred vendor if you have that, because it just doesn't have enough of the weight associated with it. So, yeah. Anyways, I would love to talk to him, whomever he is.
Okay. Yeah, I can put you in touch. I was a little surprised, in part because, like, I'm not close enough to this, but like ESG in the investing world had its day a couple of years ago. It was sort of all the rage. And then slowly over the last few years, especially with the new administration, but even before then, there was a whole contingent of folks on Wall Street that were like trying to really poke holes in, ESG as a category. And, I don't know I'm not expert enough to know if that was, motivated by facts or something else. Let's say it that way. It was it seemed, even at its base, some probably politically motivated. I mean, it was politically motivated in some ways in the beginning, but is it Larry Fink, I think, wrote an article back in 2020-ish about how ESG was critical to the future of, overall business success, et cetera. Anyway, so I've been following it loosely, but I was surprised that this was a startup and their whole focus was not on carbon accounting or anything else. It was just the S and the G, and it was, seems to be a bit out of favor, but that's my novice perspective.
Yeah, if I'd push back on that, what I'd say is that the people that were pushing against it, ESG as a concept, there was a little truth mixed in with a lot of political bullshit. The truth of it is that some of the earliest proponents of it were the ones that were. It was just kind of like squishy bullshit. Like they didn't like have a whole lot of metrics around it or numbers, and they were just like, yeah, So like there was one organization here in the Denver area that invests in startups, and they were focused on kind of ESG sort of metrics, but they were so loosely defined as like, was the founder a person of color or a woman? Okay, well that qualifies as an ESG investment. And you're like, actually, well, no. I mean, like it's great that like there's this diversity of kind of like of founders, but there's so much more that goes into it than that. And like you're kind of squishy just accepting of it, like is kind of doing damage actually to the brand and to the category. Um, and then there was the people that wanted to kind of blow it up because they're kind of raw knuckle capitalists and they like to stomp on people in order to get to the top, and they actually don't really care that your CEO is banging the HR director. So there's that. But the reality of it is that ESG is, I kind of saw it as something that like took the next step in the product adoption curve. If ESG is a product, it went from early adopters to early market about that point, which is to say that it's now a standard business practice. You're going to have a hard time finding a major company without a sustainability program associated with that, or without some basic HR policies around like not banging the HR director. Like, so there's sorry to HR directors out there. But anyways, so it's just becoming like a business standard now. The other part of it is that like global business, like there are regulations that enforce this sort of stuff outside of the United States. And these large organizations aren't going to have one set of rules for the US and another set for Europe or Canada or Australia. They're just going to have one set of rules. And so that's where we're at right now. Even though people would think that like carbon accounting is out of favor and there's this Trump administration that wants to shit all over it, for a lot of different reasons, we're actually having a great year. So,
well, that's good. There's a silver lining in there.
There's, it would be better. It would be better if we had somebody that was trying to encourage responsible behavior rather than to encourage, irresponsibility. But, that's where we're at. Well, speaking of which, let's get to some of our news stories today, Neal.
Speaking of irresponsible behavior.
Yeah, gallivanting as responsible behavior. Trump is taking over Washington, D.C. He's nationalized the D.C. police force and it put him under federal direction. This goes after, really kind of like changes it decades of precedence about like DC being able to run its own affairs. This is kind of in light of apparently the incident that started this. The larger context is that DC has, like most major cities in the United States, has been dealing with a little bit of crime and some homelessness. Like most major cities, kind of coming out of the pandemic. Like most major cities, the crime rate has actually been going down pretty significantly, and homelessness has been improving, but it's kind of it takes you a little bit of time to do that. But the incident that prompted it was the Doge staffer known by the handle of Big Balls was carjacked and beaten up. So there's that. So this young 20-something-year-old that like fired a whole bunch of people that didn't really know much of anything. You got carjacked. You don't wish violence upon anybody, but like, kind of, I have to say I wasn't like all that upset that he got, beat up because he's such a jackass. I don't know, man. Anyways, so Trump decided that like that was what the pretense that he needed in order to take over Washington, D.C. using federal troops.
Epstein.
What do you think about that?
I think Epstein.
Yeah. That's the real thing, right? It's like he just doesn't want to like admit that, like he that
totally.
Like there's paperwork that he's a kitty diddler.
He wants to change the subject. Like it couldn't be more obvious. He just doesn't want to talk about Epstein.
Yeah, it's funny. Like everybody in like literally everybody in the country is in on it now. Like everybody in the country knows exactly what the fuck's going on. We're all read in. We know that you're a kitty fucker. And you don't want people to talk about it.
I mean, there's no way at this point he's not in the files. I don't like. Who knows what is actually in the files? But he clearly doesn't want them to come out. He doesn't want to talk about them. He's trying to change the subject. Anyway, I digress a little bit. So you touched on some things there. Like homelessness is bad in this country. I think we have a terrible track record of how to deal with homelessness and crime in cities. And I think, all you have to do is travel the world to know that we're doing it wrong. There are other places that have social safety nets, and they don't end up with places like San Francisco where you've got, no kidding, shit on the sidewalks and homeless people everywhere. It's not as bad as what Fox News would make you think. Like, you can walk around San Francisco and not see a homeless person for a long time. It's not everywhere. They haven't taken over the streets. But if you go down the wrong street, there will be shit on the sidewalk. It's true. There's always, like, in these things, there's always an element of truth to the story that's being told. But like, the Fox News camera went to the one street with shit on it and they took a picture of the shit. And then, like, it becomes this meme. Like, I get calls from my cousins in the Midwest, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you okay? I just saw on Fox News that San Francisco's being taken over and there's shit all over every street." And you're like, well, no, there was shit on one street, and I did see that. That is a real thing, but also there are a lot of streets in San Francisco. That was one street. Anyway, I digress.
I also want to point out, this is also a rural issue, but nobody ever talks about it, right? Like, as I was driving around Western Colorado, coming back from the trip, we went through some pretty, rural ag towns, and land is really, really cheap, and you can get essentially something that should be condemned, but there are people living in it, a mobile home that's been out there for 50 years, that's rotting in place. It would be uninhabitable, within city limits, but because it's out there, everyone's like, oh, okay, whatever. Yeah. And, there's all sorts of junk and shit in the front yard. And, I've spent a lot of time, like, in rural Idaho and rural Colorado. I'm a son of the West. There's homelessness there too, right? Like, real homes. And so, is that really any different than a fucking tent on the street? Not really. At the end of the day, the only thing is it's a little bit more out of sight. But if this were a responsible country, we would care about all those people too. And we would help them with getting the resources. But this country has mostly chosen that we're going to just, scream about shit on the street in San Francisco than actually try to help people that need help.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting perspective. I hadn't thought about the rural condemned. I've actually looked at a few of those in my college days. I was looking for cheap housing, and at one point I went and looked at a mobile home that was, like, within my price range, and it was exactly what you just described, basically rotting in place. And I still remember it because I walked into the place. I'm like, I don't think I could live here. I don't know. Nobody should live here. Why is it being advertised for whatever it was, like $400 a month or whatever it was, whatever I could afford? And that's a really interesting point. I just, to bring this back to what's happening in DC, though, I think that is there homelessness there? 100%. Should we do better? Yes. Is the National Guard the answer to that problem?
Fuck no.
Like, of course not. Of course not. Which is why it's only happening because of Epstein. And at this point, it's so obvious. But actually, he's, I think, having some success turning the channel because he's throwing so much shit up into the atmosphere, and some of it's sticking now. And I don't know. I don't live in, the MAGA world. I'm sure some people are still talking about it, but it gets less over time. We'll see how long he can. Well, we'll see how long the MAGA universe will go along with that.
It continues to make me think about, like, the responsibility of military leaders in the age of Trump. So there's this where, like, we're nationalizing, or the National Guard's moving into Washington, D.C. We already had the U.S. Marine Corps and the National Guard in California for no fucking reason.
There's a reason. Sorry, let me push back. There was a reason. It was just the spectacle. It was a reason that we don't agree with. I just want to be clear that the reason was because he wanted to make a spectacle of it and he wanted to normalize it. But sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So he's normalizing the use of the military for non-military functions.
Yeah.
And then, there was kind of tangential to this, but, like, relatedly is the story that came out here the last couple of days about the transgender troops that were being thrown out of the service, and that had been promised retirements because they were being thrown out not for failure to serve, but because we decided that we no longer, as a country, valued their service. And then they're having the retirements taken away by civilian leadership in the Department of the Air Force. And I haven't seen, to that end, like, I haven't seen anybody actually standing up and saying, this is bullshit. We're not going to do this. why isn't I don't understand why there isn't a general in the Air Force that's saying, no, these are my people and you're not going to do that to them. Fine if you make a policy change where we're not going to have like transgender people. I don't agree with it or not. But the fact that you're taking their retirement away from them is just like, what are we doing here? Right. Why? And so, like, I guess there's this question of like, what responsibility do military leaders have to stand up for things that are maybe technically legal, but highly unethical?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, are we the baddies? Like that's what comes to mind.
Yeah.
What's that movie? The Inglorious Bastards, was that the movie?
Mm-hmm.
Where
No, that yeah, the one where like Brad Pitt plays a leader of a bunch of like Jewish resistance Americans that go into Germany and fuck everything up.
yeah. And at some point one of the characters, he thinks he's a good guy, but at some point he realizes that like he's on the wrong side and he's like, are we the baddies? Are we the baddies? I feel like that's where that's this moment. Like we're hiring a bunch of police that wear masks and go pull people off the street and aren't willing to be public about it. That's ICE. And we're doing stuff like this. I don't get it, man. Like I thought we were better than this.
Yeah, just from the sake of the military too, just from like kind of a real maintenance of the military sort of thing too. Like, I think we're doing long-term damage to the brand of the U.S. military. Right, the idea that like we were the good guys, we were the back-to-back World War champs. We freed Kuwait. Like Iraq and Afghanistan, poorly managed over a couple of decades, like did some damage to that. But it was like you could always blame that on political leadership. But at a certain point, like you have to take some fucking ownership for what you're doing. And if you're just continuing to do I'm just following orders, like you're going to damage the brand. And the American military can do some really incredible things, as we've talked about before. But like you got to get people that want to serve. You got to get talented people that want to serve. And if you're going to be the people that are enforcing, all sorts of bullshit, like you're not going to get those talented people to serve anymore. You're going to get ideologues.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I guess I'm putting it in my own terms there of like, I don't think if I'm an 18-year-old and we're the baddies, you're going to fewer people to sign up. I guess I'm saying a version of the same thing. I guess it's just, you're expecting more from the leadership. I'm just saying, like, if we're not doing the right thing here from the get, like, why would anybody want to be a part of that organization?
Exactly. It's yeah, both of them. The leadership is doing both short-term and long-term damage to the organization because they're failing to stand up for its needs.
Speaking of leadership,
yeah, let's talk about it.
The topic I wanted to bring up was this summit that's coming up in, I don't know if they call it a summit or what, but Trump and Putin are going to meet in Alaska later this week. Ironically, Alaska used to be a part of Russia, historically a part of Russia. And I bring that up because Putin's claim to Ukraine is that Ukraine was historically a part of Russia. So I don't know. I don't know exactly, but there's some irony there that they're going to meet in what was historically part of Russia. Look, one of the things I like about Trump is that he's willing to go meet with anybody. I think our diplomacy has been, a set of signals, and you don't, give platforms to people and you don't talk to people. I think I like this attribute of Trump, that he's just willing to go talk to anybody. I think this is largely a positive thing. And I'm not a statesman, so I'm not a diplomat. I'm sure all my diplomatic friends are telling me, I can hear them telling me all the reasons why that's a bad point of view. But I think dialogue is always good. I really dislike that they are, I also read that Alaska is about as far from Europe as you can get physically. And if that's not a symbol of just how wrong-headed, having a conversation about a war that is happening in Europe and one of the key players is not there, it feels a lot like they're going to get to a place where, yeah, I'm sure Trump and Putin can come to an agreement, but like half of the party isn't there. So I can't see this unless it's like the first step in a much longer process. I can't see this resulting in anything. But yeah, I don't know. What's your take on those two getting together in the last frontier?
Having lived in Alaska, I don't want to be spoiled by that buffoon, either one of those assholes. So I think Alaska's a pretty amazing place, and I love it. Yeah, contrary to the guy's brand, it was, the art of the deal or something like that. He's actually a shit negotiator. He's really, really bad at it.
Really bad.
And, I don't mind like the paradigm breaking of like, let's meet with anybody, but like the idea of like, before you even show up saying like, yeah, okay, Russia probably gets Eastern Ukraine. Like,
yeah,
what's
that? Why are you basically given up the negotiation before you even arrive? What's the logic in that?
Yeah, there is no logic. The logic should be get the fuck out of Ukraine. I'll meet with you if you want to talk, but like get the fuck out of Ukraine. And if then you have to be like, okay, we'll work with Crimea, and then that would be maybe, I don't know, it's still fucking morally wrong, but like sometimes there's sometimes a gap between what is morally right and what can be achieved in a world of violence. So there's that, and then like like the people that are invaded and that are fighting and dying and that we've been supporting better for or in the Trump administration for worse, like they're the ones that get to decide when the war ends, right? And if they're willing to fight until the last man to expel the Russian invaders, then there's that. And like they're still making hits. I saw a drone hit against an oil refinery happen a couple of days ago inside of Russia. Like Ukraine's figured out how to put the pain to Russia, not just inside of Ukraine's borders, but inside of Russia's borders, deep.
Yeah. So I agree with all that, but as I went down the logic train here, if Trump makes a deal with Putin and then Zelensky, Ukraine, does not accept it, Trump's backlash could be, well, fine, we're truly not going to supply you with weapons and intel and the other things that are critical to Ukraine's success here. And the Europeans, despite them coming partway towards upping their sort of defense game, still can't support Ukraine in the way that the U.S. can. They don't have the systems, they don't have the cash, they don't have the capability. So the U.S. really is the critical player here. And so, as Trump said, Zelensky does not have the cards. I really wonder if Trump comes back with a deal that is, he's already given it up. He's already said he's going to, Putin's going to get at least some of what he's asked for, some terrain. Then what's Zelensky to do?
Oh yeah, from a real politics standpoint, Trump absolutely can go without Zelensky and fuck up Ukraine's world.
Yeah,
because they are pretty dependent upon it. But like, if the United States and Russia are seen as being on opposite sides of a negotiating table associated with this, the way to strengthen that negotiation would be to bring your ally to it, and then to play a little bit of the middleman rather than being the one that's like leaving the ally behind and negotiating on their behalf and then telling them fuck you if you don't take the deal. Like it's just a shitty way to run a railroad.
Well, I also, like, just as a reminder, I've had a Ukraine flag up in front of my house since, I don't know, the first months that happened. And the reason is because I see this as the first of many important dominoes. One, it upends the world order. It rewards invasions of countries that are, if not in NATO, but are allies, and proves that the United States won't stand behind them, at least for not until not until the end. And then in addition to that, like, the world is watching, and there are other parts of the world that are going to fall, maybe not right away, but over time. And we've proven that we're not going to stand behind a country like Ukraine. You think of Taiwan or other examples around the world. It upends the European balance. It upends, like, if you think Putin is going to stop there, holy shit, go back and look at the 1930s. There's just a bunch of reasons why you have to draw the line and stick to it. And it is in the fundamental U.S. interest to hold this line. And, JD Vance out there talking about how we're done. He said that yesterday. We're done. Like, well, holy shit, fuck me. Like, we can't be done, man, because there's too much core U.S. interest at stake.
Yeah, it's there's that, right, which is like, this is in our strategic interest in so many different ways. It's also like just really a great ROI, cost effective way of doing
Yeah.
a whole bunch of things. Like the Ukrainians did more to the Russian bomber fleet than like the United States did in the entire Cold War. Right.
Yep.
They did that in one day. They took out a third of the Russian strategic bomber fleet. That's a pretty good ROI.
Yeah.
There's the fact that Bashar al-Assad fell because the Russians needed to pull more assets into Ukraine. And so as a result, like, that asshole's gone, right? That like changed the order in the Middle East there. There's a whole bunch of stuff that like Putin made a strategic miscalculation about, like whether the US would be willing to kind of stand up for this during the Biden administration. He might be proved right ultimately in the Trump administration. But that doesn't make it good for the U.S. that we would be going that direction. Let's switch gears maybe a little bit. You want to talk about ChatGPT, man? Model number 5 came out in the last couple of days here. Have you had a chance to give it a try?
I have. I mean, I don't think I've pushed it to its, really what GPT-5 is capable of doing. The line I heard, which is I'm going to try to push it, is like GPT-5 basically created ChatGPT all over again in a day. Like it's now in the spot where it can make much more complex things. I don't know. Have you?
I've only given it a couple of tries. Again, I was, running around the woods, so I didn't have the most chance to. A little underwhelmed right now. So, like, for example, I was asking it a question about average high temperatures in Denver in the 80s versus today. And it took like 5 times, very, very simple question, for it to come back and give a response. And the response wasn't, it might have been technically correct, but it wasn't particularly coherent. So I've been really, really impressed with ChatGPT 4, what was it, Sigma? So we'll see about that. Maybe 5 just needs to build the kind of the body of knowledge that 4 had built, et cetera. But right now, I haven't been impressed.
Well, I mean, I also haven't had a chance to personalize it. That's one of the key features of it, is that you're supposed to be able to ask it to be more cynical or a better listener or more aggressive or more nerdy. And I haven't asked it to do that. I think you can actually choose from some of those, and it'll help you with it. Help you in the way that you want to be helped. I don't know how easy it is going to be to toggle, because there are times when I want a very nerdy, precise, engineering type answer, and there are other times when I want something that's friendly and I can send to an investor. The other part that I haven't really done is like how it's supposed to be more conversational. So one of the things that Perplexity does really well, if you haven't tried Perplexity in conversation mode, it really is. It's like the chatbot you want to have. Like if you talk to Siri right now, you ask it a question, it'll send you like, here's 5 things I found on the internet. Perplexity is like, we'll just start talking to you, like ask it about the War of 1812. It'll just start talking to you about the War of 1812. And you can say, oh, that's interesting. What about this general? And then it'll go off. And so it's much more conversational. So ChatGPT 5 is supposed to have more of that. And it maybe as an interesting side note, I had the chance to catch up with some of my former Google colleagues, and I asked them actually, I just mentioned Siri, which is woefully behind. If you just go have a conversation with Perplexity and then Siri, it's night and day. Like Siri is based on 5-year-old tech, like not generative AI, not impressive at all. It'll give you some answers. Like if you ask it a very specific question, it'll pull something very specific from the web. But if you want a sense of where like customer service is going, go talk to Perplexity. Like I said, you can just spend, in fact, some people say you should just spend 10 minutes a day with AI and learn something new. I think that's really smart. I talked to my Google buddies though, and what I asked them is like, why doesn't Google Home incorporate a Gemini? And I got and I got a bunch of, so I had Google Home. It's like Alexa, right? And I ask questions of Google Home all the time. And it's a lot like Siri right now. You ask a very specific question, you'll get the answer. I can also control my lights and turn on the thermostat and all those things. But it is not integrated because of internal team friction, which I saw when I was at Google too. There's sort of little fiefdoms inside of Google. There's, I don't know, 30 different products. And this is how you know Google's really grown up. Used to be a small, nimble company that could do whatever it wanted. And now it's not accessing some of the coolest tech it's invented over its lifetime. In one of the primary use cases, Google Home, because of an internal, like, holy crap, that's very disappointing.
Yeah, the smart speakers, the voice interaction with the internet really had a kind of a moment, and it seems to have just really fizzled. And it's because it's not connected, and it's so yeah, that doesn't surprise me. That's what's going on at Google is that it's parochialism that's associated with that, but more the question of it's kind of just how, like, what's old is new again. You know, Google has become, the old dinosaur now that's primed for disruption. This is why startups exist, is because these old fuckers get bad internal dynamics, and leadership is fine because they continue to build their valuations through acquisition rather than new product development, and delighting customers with new experiences. I mean, like, if you've used any of Google's like ad software, it's awful as well. Like, you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, never be allowed to talk to a human being, be confused all the time about like what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, nowhere else in the world can you have a business where like you can spend hundreds, or Facebook, same thing, where you can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars and not be allowed to talk to a human being. Like,
yeah.
And they can only do that because they have like this, monopolistic position in the marketplace associated with that.
Yeah. I will say this. I got a really good bit of advice though. And this was for Gemini, which is the Google generative AI tool. Somebody described to me, it was one of my Google buddies, said, you should just turn on voice mode and start talking. Like, if you want to create a job description, like, and you're not quite sure what it should look like, and you're sort of like, weighted here a little bit. Like, one person described to me, like, I'll just turn on the microphone and talk for 5 minutes and then say, create me a one pager that synthesizes all of that. And if you're unsure of something, what something should look like, you can just free stream for 5 minutes, and then the generative AI will sort of put that into a more neat box. I've been using it primarily with, I'll type it a prompt and it'll give me a response. I'm looking forward to trying that sort of voice-based. Like, I'm unsure, I don't know even quite how to say this, but like, I'll say it in 15 different ways and it'll figure out the right way to spit out the result.
Yeah. So AI has an incredible amount of promise, and there's a reason there's a lot of resources going towards that. And OpenAI, for better for worse, is a big part of that. It's completely changed the venture capital ecosystem about like where all the money's going. Really solved actually a big problem for the VC world, which is like, where can you put a lot of money if you want to raise a lot of money from LPs?
Yeah.
And Sam Altman, the CEO there at OpenAI, the people that run ChatGPT, deserves a great deal of credit for that. He, knew the ecosystem from his time at Y Combinator, and was able to go out and raise a stupid amount of money, and continues to raise a stupid amount of money because he knows that this is going to be, it is the disruptor to the ecosystem, and that it will be the new monopoly, the new Google.
Yeah. Shifting gears yet again, the next thing we were going to talk about was Gaza, and Israel's plan to take over full control. So I think most people know they'd been, October 7th, which is, been a long time ago now. Over 1,000 Israelis were killed. Lots were taken hostage.
Absolutely horrible.
Horrible. Since then, Israel's been waging a war on Gaza to root out the leadership there. That's Hamas. And they got to a point where there's still a good number of hostages that have not been returned. Likely, most of those are not still alive, but uh, like to have closure for the families. Of the last month, or a little bit, maybe more than a month, aid has not been getting to the Gazans. So there's lots of starving people in Gaza. The Palestinians don't have enough food, and there's been lots of reporting on the famine that's occurring there. And then just this last weekend, the Israeli leadership came out and said, yeah, we're just gonna take over the whole place. And as a result, we're gonna end up with full military control. That's how we're gonna get those last hostages back, and that's how we get to root out the last bit of Hamas. So I don't know. I'll just tee that up for you. Good plan, bad plan.
From a military standpoint, I don't understand why they didn't do that sooner. Right? Instead of like massive airdrops, like you can't rescue a hostage with an air delivered weapon. Like it's a physical impossibility. The hostages, and you're not going to be able to exact enough pain against a terrorist who is using their own population as a negotiating point. The abuse against that own population to your disadvantage. So I don't understand why the Israelis didn't go in with ground forces. Gaza is a very small land area. I mean, it's relatively tiny and it's hugely densely populated. And so like just literally go block by block. They had the armored vehicles in order, and it would have been difficult, absolutely. But it would have been much, much more successful. And so I don't understand why they didn't do that to begin with. And they could have been, if I had an instructor at the Naval Academy that talked about like that Israel was three things, and it was only going to be able to pick two. The three things is that it was a Jewish state. It had the land area that it had there, and it was democratic. And it was only going to be able to pick two. And that's been a really successful framing for me because, for a long time, we've been talking about like this two-state solution, right? Which is that there would be a Palestine and there would be an Israel, and everybody would just like have their own land area, right? But Israel's not been adhering to that because they've been allowing so much of the settling in the West Bank. Okay. And of course, like the Palestinian side of the equation, both the PLO and also, Hamas, like they bear a great deal of responsibility for it. But nonetheless, Israel is the more powerful member of that side. They purposely split Hamas from the PLO in order to create a divided Palestine there. They've, to a large extent, the Netanyahu government's been kind of keeping Hamas in power because it's a useful foil for them to continue to attack the Palestinians or to abuse Palestinian rights because ostensibly a great number of Palestinians are under terrorist control. And let's be clear, Hamas is a terrorist organization. So when October 7th happened, and when I saw what happened with the Israelis, I knew that the two-state solution was dead. And it was just a matter of time. So now you have this question of, okay, if the two-state solution is dead, if there's not going to be a separate land that's going to be Palestine, what are we left with? We're left with a large population of people that would consider themselves Palestinians and not Israelis being in occupied territory. And so they're going to be second-class citizens. So that's where we're at. They don't view Palestinians as humans with the same amount of rights as Israelis, and there's no way that they're ever going to incorporate them into the body politic of Israel. And so I think we are, by definition, if it wasn't before October 7th, it was definitely going to happen after. We're moving into Israel being kind of an apartheid state, where they hold people under threat of violence, under their control, and they deny them basic human rights. And I think we're seeing the Israeli military has been weaponizing food in Palestine right now, or against the Palestinians, I should say, whether you want to use the language of calling it Palestine, but within the Gaza Strip. They've been weaponizing food against civilian population, and I just don't know what to call it other than like genocidal behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. It's I have to keep trying to hold multiple things in my head at one time. It's awful behavior, and the justification comes from October 7th, and wanting to prevent that from ever happening again. I think I wonder when it runs out. Apparently, for the Israeli, it's not run out at all, and there's we can say from the outside that the famine is unacceptable. But I've read some things over the last week that suggest that that's not true at all. That the Israeli population is still very much behind the persecution of this plan in particular to roll through Gaza and take it over, and that the folks who suggest otherwise are shouted down as being unpatriotic and having forgotten about the hostages and things like that. So the folks who are making the decisions inside Israel are, pretty, I think, different minded than where we are today. And for my Jewish friends in America, we're, I think, in a very, I don't know, a very different place. Like, I don't think that there's an expectation that is even remotely aligned between an American who sees the famine on TV every night and the Israeli who is either seeing it or maybe ignoring it and still focused on the hostages. So you bring that all the way back to the political decision makers. I think Netanyahu is like, look, if I've still got local support for this, let's just keep going, despite all of the suffering of the individuals in Gaza. And there's a lot of it. It seems to me that he is, as the saying goes, all politics is local. I don't get the sense yet that they have tired of the suffering in the same way that we have in America.
No, absolutely not. I'd also say that Israel is definitely not a monolith. There were some pretty massive protests that were in Tel Aviv here the other day as well. So
yeah,
there's
good
that.
point.
And their internal media, they have different media outlets, have been talking about this as well. So I want to make sure we don't paint them as monolithic. And in the American Jewish experience as well. Like I have Jewish friends that were both like very fearful after October 7th about like their own personal safety. And they have all sorts of historical significance about why they should be concerned about that. Like that is not an illegitimate fear. But also don't agree with the Israeli response, right? And I think we have to be very careful to separate Jewishness from the actions of a state government, in particular that of the Netanyahu government. It's worth remembering he was under criminal charge before October 7th. This is his Epstein, right? Like he's using, as long as he can keep this war going, the longer he can avoid punishment. And I think it's to the detriment of Israel. If you believe in wanting a Jewish state that's democratic in the Middle East as a homeland for the Jewish people, Netanyahu is not doing that. Just full stop. He is moving away from democracy and by consequence weakening the ability for it to remain a Jewish state moving forward. Either that or he's going to kill a fucking lot of people and forever tar the ability of Jews to look back at the Holocaust and say never again.
Yeah, I don't know how much this hurts them long term. I think it's on the one hand really damaged people's perception of Israel. You go back to are people good or bad? I think there's a lot of people who used to see Israel as unquestionably the good guy, and now there's a lot less of that. I can't put. I'm sure there's somebody out there that's got polling numbers on it. I just know for sure that there are some folks out there that are no longer on Israel's side. You watch starving babies, that does something to
Yeah.
move the public opinion.
I mean, the example of that is like, for example, Australia just recognized Palestine as with the
Yeah,
United
there's a
Nations as an independent state.
there's a
You know,
backlash. I think, if you're a realist like Netanyahu is, look, he he's got Hamas down to basically dust. Hezbollah to the north is weakened and Syria's gone. Israel's been sort of attacked. They're sort of we talked before about whether or not they're actually behind on their nuclear ambitions or not. I think his perspective, I think that they've largely strengthened Israel from a military standpoint. I think in the short term, you're right. In the long term, maybe he's bought Israel some time to bring Qatar and Saudi Arabia and other Arab states along. That was another big thing that happened this last week, is that the Arab states actually came out and opposed Hamas. That's a big move. Because before I think they were just silent on it before. I'm not totally sure, but I know for sure that what they said was that they think it's time for Hamas to go. There's nobody to replace them. The Palestinian Authority was predated Hamas, and they were equally ineffectual.
they still exist in the West Bank.
They exist,
right?
but they're not effective. And well, maybe you could argue. I mean, it's just factions. But yeah, you're right. They do exist. There are also representatives from Hamas that exist outside of Gaza that are trying to be a voice for the Palestinian people. I think that's where I think the rubber meets the road with what you teed up there. Is like, is this good for the long term interest of Israel? It's apparently good for the short term interests. I think the jury is definitely out on what it means long term.
I'm not even so sure it's good for the short term interest. But within the long term interest, to go back to my previous point, previous thought is like, I don't know why they didn't go with ground forces and go house by house. Remove Hamas, re-strengthen the Palestinian Authority, and like, there should have been some sort of degree of commitment there, like using the world's opprobrium for the terrorism of Hamas in order to build their case on the public stage rather than to damage it. And they should have gone house by house, re-strengthened the Palestinian Authority, removed Hamas from power there, got concessions from the Palestinian Authority. A part of that is like the ability to prosecute Hamas, independently. But in part of re-strengthening the Palestinian Authority is they would have to stand up to their own internal politics of not allowing settlers to steal land, which is what's been happening. So, I don't think that there's anything that could be changed at this point. I think that, we're already down a path of a course of action that's going to end up with Israel massively weakened in the long term, because people are not going to be willing to accept what it's going to take for them to kind of retain what they think that they can do, which is Netanyahu in power, all their borders or more taking from the Palestinians, and not allowing the Palestinian people to have any rights. Like that, I don't see a path out without this, like, radically reshaping Israel in a pretty major way. Well, speaking of shit that's burning, my home state of Colorado. So when I was up backpacking, when we were up in the Vestal Basin, a little smoke blew in one night, and we had just gone to bed. Actually, I was in the tent. I was tired because we'd been hiked up into this fairly difficult area, and one of the other guys that was in the basin, there was like two other tents, like quarter mile away, maybe half mile away, probably quarter mile. And these rock climbers that were spending like days kind of going up and down some of the peaks just in the basin there. And they came and hollered at us in our tent. And so I came out and talked to them. And they had been seeing ash falling in the basin there. And so that gave them like some pause about like, hey, just want to let you know, if we've got sat phones, if we say it's time to go, you probably will want to get going. So not that big of a deal, but like the fire behavior here in Colorado really picked up here in the last few days, kind of while I was up there in the backcountry. Um, so we're already into the top 10 largest wildfires in Colorado history, and it's only been burning for like 3 or 4 days as we record on the 11th. So yeah, it's one of these things that I've been working on for a few years, which is the experience of wildfire in the West, and about like to a large extent we're losing a lot of forests in the West that just aren't being recovered. Um, so I don't know. Obviously, you're in Southern California, you had to deal with the Southern California wildfires. Like this is definitely becoming kind of a fact of life in the United States, in the Western United States at least, and increasingly in the East. You have any kind of thoughts about it?
Yeah. I mean, it is. We got more fires here in Southern California now. I mean, they're not as big as they were during the so-called LA fires, but we're already back in fire season. It's every year. It seemingly gets worse. 2 years ago, it was right in my backyard. I actually had pictures I took out in my backyard of just fires kind of all around us. The LA fires, I'm a little further south than I'm about 40 miles away from them, but same time of year, they just kind of popped up, raged, spread. It is, I think what you said is it's a fact of life and not a good one. I mean, I've got friends who left California to go to Montana, and then now they're leaving Montana because there's too many fires. I mean, I don't want to paint this like we talked about with San Francisco. There's not shit on every street, but it's getting more frequent for sure. And it is impacting our lives more and more. And now that I live in sort of an area where it's targeted by fires, like I know people who have lost their homes, have been displaced, and that's just going to continue.
One of the things that happens kind of in this conversation is people tend to talk about like, oh, it's bad land management policy, which is partially true. Or people say it's all climate change. And you're like, well, yeah, that's also partially true. It's kind of all of the above. So there's this talk that it's kind of faded away a little bit there, but that they wanted to return the land to a 1900 state, which is, it used to be that like Native Americans would come through, they'd light fires fairly often, or there'd be a lightning strike or something like that. In certain areas of the West, like fires would burn through like every 15 years. And they were really they'd be large fires, but low intensity fires, burn out the underbrush, et cetera. It would allow the forest to kind of evolve to a new state. Every so often it would burn to be like they would call it a stand replacing fire. It would burn like the trees up. And so then the forest would get like this patchwork. And so it had a lot of health to it. And then we suppressed wildfire for about 100 years in completeness. The Forest Service used to have this plan of try to get a fire out by noon. So they had that. So the land management point is there's a lot of wood there that shouldn't be there. Because we allowed all those little trees that should have been burned up in those frequent fires to grow into bigger trees, and now they're all stressed because they don't have enough water, et cetera. But the other part of it, and I think is probably the part that like really bums me out, is that I think most of the forests that we have in the Western United States especially are not evolved or adapted to the climate that we are in now, and certainly not the climate that we're going to. And what we're seeing for like some of these mega fire sort of behaviors, where you have like really big fires that burn really fast, really hot, put up things like fire tornadoes in Redding, or destroy cities in Southern California, or what we have going on here in Colorado, is we're just losing these forests. Like they're going to be gone because these forests are reacting to the fact that they don't belong where they're at anymore. That the type of forest that should be there is something that's a forest that's further downhill or further south, and the forest can't adapt fast enough because the climate's changing so quick. So that's what kind of gives me, just like I've adapted to it for a long time, but like it's just like this degree of sadness of like, if you really love the woods and the outdoors and the forests, like go see them now. They're leaving, and we're not spending the money to help them to adapt or to thin them or to do any of the things to correct some of those land management problems.
Ordered. Yeah, I mean, it's an all of the above. I also point out that it's one thing if you love the forests, It's another thing if you want to have a house with insurance, because the more you see the forests burn, the more those fires are, as you say, they're not the once every 15 years you burn out the underbrush. These are fast moving, very hot, run through neighborhoods in a day kind of fires, and they're getting more frequent. Those are the ones that destroy homes. And what I'm driving at is drive up insurance rates, and sometimes drive up insurance rates so much so that you can't, like, they're unaffordable. Like, insurance companies know exactly how much to charge, and if they can't make a profitable, if they can't write you a profitable policy for them, they're just not going to write you a policy at all. And that's the direction that's already happening in some places, and that's the direction that will get people's attention sooner than later, I think.
Yep. As my friend Nick Gardner at Premiums for the Planet says, it's the power of government moving at the speed of business. It's going to make areas uninsurable, and if you're uninsurable, it's not a store of wealth. You can't count on your home as being a place where you keep wealth. And so if you can't keep it as a store of wealth, it's going to devalue it as and that's going to have some pretty major effects to the American economy as well.
Not good.
Yeah. Well, let's get to the section that are kind of our goods, bads, and others, as far as our personal life, the world that we're living in, et cetera. What's going on good in your world there, Neal? Other than, like, we should say hello to your father, Don, for being a good and faithful listener.
Yes. Hi, Dad. Yeah, I mentioned earlier, I was in Austin last week. I hadn't been there for a long time. And wow, Austin was just amazing. It has grown a lot since I've been there like 10 years ago. It is also now a thriving startup ecosystem. Capital Factory is kind of in the middle of it, and I met a ton of great people there. But I also just want to say that, it is, it's just thriving. It's just hopping on multiple levels. They have invested in infrastructure. So, the airport to the downtown was easy, and the downtown area was easy to navigate, and we could get to multiple meetings fast, and there were lots of people there. I mean, it's just sort of like what you want. And it was enough scale to be really effective, but not like overwhelming New York City, massive, don't know where to turn because there's too much going on. So anyway, it was just really good to connect with that community. I sort of thought about startup ecosystems, in Southern California, and like, how could you build one in Indiana? I'm actually on the IU board, advisory board. That's a really, that's a funny story.
Longer story.
So I'll give you the Cliff Notes version, is that a mentor of mine asked me to do it, and it's turned out to be an amazing experience. I was privileged to meet a guy named Jack Gill, who was one of the original VCs back in, Kleiner and Perkins were starting Kleiner Perkins. He was in that cadre, right? So he started a firm called Vanguard Ventures, and his famous line is, I made more money than anybody deserves, which, gives you an indication of how successful he was. Very successful VC. He became a mentor of mine, and I followed all his advice. And then at one point he asked me to do something, and I was just like, yes, of course. He started this program at IU, one of his alma maters. And there's this amazing entrepreneurship instructor who leads the Johnson Center for Entrepreneurship. We call him Dr. K. Dr. K runs this amazing West Coast advisory board. Like, we don't get paid anything. But we do interact with students. We help students in their entrepreneurship classes. We take pitches. We go to a couple events a year. Look, I have cousins that live in Indiana. That's my connection, I guess. Lots of family there, but of course, I didn't go to school there or anything else. But look, I'm a part of the startup ecosystem, so I'm sort of a fan of, like, trying to help wherever I can, because
a little pay it forward, yeah.
Yeah, entrepreneurship is hard, man. If we don't all pitch in, it just makes it, it's on us to do our part for the community, and so that's what I try to do. And as I say, it's been totally worthwhile. I've made some great connections, great friendships on, other board members, and Dr. K is amazing. So much so that I've now introduced him to my alma maters and said, hey, you guys should do this, rather than just calling me every 6 months and asking for money. Like, I'm much more likely to give money if I have some like personal interaction. Like, so let's build a board around whatever. Like, for me, it's entrepreneurship, but if I could be on a board at the University of Arkansas or at Columbia to give me an opportunity to be more substantively involved with the school, I will be more likely to give, which, you know, it's less transactional that way. So that's the short version of the story. But anyway,
that's good. I mean, it always goes to like as somebody that's in kind of the greater Midwest, you know, not on the coast startup ecosystem here. Like that's something I appreciate is that there's a lot of talent to be found kind of all over. There's no shortage of good ideas, limited to just, you know, the Bay Area. And if we don't foster those ecosystems, we are making this country more fragile. We're not, it's not to our benefit to do it that way. So, you know, kudos. Great. I'm proud you're doing
that. My bad is, look, like, well, I'll start with Secretary Burgum announced over the last week that he's going to review every wind project before it gets built. Personally, he's going to review them. It's like not
that's
something.
That's a good thing for the Secretary of the Interior to spend his time on, right?
Totally. Like what? No. Look, I mean, and there's other things like EPA is starting to use some of its sort of administrative power to make it harder. I'm not going to get into the technical weeds. This is the world I live in every day. But let me just say this: like the administrative state, the political appointees of this administration are just making it harder to build wind and solar projects. And look, I mean, they did the One Big Beautiful Bill, and I have railed on this podcast about how it's going to drive prices up. We're already starting to see that, because when you have expanding demand and you like shoot yourself in the foot by limiting supply, prices are going up. That's just like everybody from is ever taken an economics class knows how supply and demand works. But this is just another example where like the fastest growing sectors, the couple of technologies that can address this challenge of not enough energy supply are getting kneecapped in yet another way. And it's just nonsensical. Whether, you know, politics aside, this is just like, it makes us less energy secure. It's going to increase prices. It's going to increase our reliance on foreign adversaries. And I'll unpack that some other time. But,
and foreign oil for that matter.
That's what I mean. It's like 86% of the world's oil, as my last count. That number might have changed a little bit, but you know, let's just say well over 80% of the world's oil is owned by national oil companies. That's China, Venezuela, Russia, Nigeria, and other places like that. So when you increase our dependence on oil, so, like the U.S. drill baby drill thing happens, and there are, you know, yes, we'll produce more oil and gas in the U.S., but a necessary byproduct of that is that we are more reliant on foreign Saudi Arabia. I didn't even mention Saudi Arabia, right? Like the reason we keep going back to the Middle East is because of that fact that 85% of the world's oil is owned by national oil companies. My other this week is, I think, you know, if you look at the underlying data, the tariffs are finally starting to have the impact that we thought they were going to have from the beginning. Prices, you can start to see the underlying prices of not the consumer prices just yet, but like the feed in to the companies that make the stuff. Those prices are going up, and unemployment and the Main Street economy is starting to show cracks. And I think it's totally divorced from Wall Street, which seems to be on this amazing tear. I was watching a program the other day, and Kevin O'Leary was saying, "But look at the market; it's at an all-time high." I'm like, "Yeah, yes, it is, but that's an irrational high." I think there's plenty of underlying signals that the economy is faltering. And I'll end on this point. If you want, one signal of that is that the Fed is now actually probably going to cut interest rates the next time around, which is what Trump has wanted all along. But if they're cutting interest rates, that means that the economy is in trouble. And so, or is actually showing the fundamentals of it being in trouble. So, keep your eye on that space.
You don't need to worry about it. They fired the guy that would tell you all those numbers anyways, right? So, or gal, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
All right. What do you got?
For me, yeah. So, we got back in time. My son, as we've talked about before, is in Scouts. And so they have this really cool thing where he's doing this aviation merit badge. So we went out to the museum, the Wings Over the Rockies, this weekend, and we had like a little thing out there. They should have had like a ground school associated with it, because you have to teach them about like what do ailerons do and like what's the airspeed indicator and like fairly technical like aviation sort of stuff for an 11-year-old. So the people that were running it were like, well, just wander around the museum and see if you can fill out the thing, and like the ones that were running the ground school or rather weren't running it didn't even realize that the museum wouldn't teach them that stuff. It was much more like simulators and like look at this cool old plane rather than like how does flight work. And so I got to sit down with Luke and essentially give him private ground school, and the kid got it. Like he understood all the physics of it really, really quickly, and he was excited about aviation. And I got to be cool for just one fleeting moment longer, where my son was like interested in like what I had to tell him and teach him, and so he was paying very close attention. So I really enjoyed that. And then next week, he gets to go up. He gets to go fly, and
yes.
there's a local nonprofit that like takes the kids flying. It costs like $25. You essentially pay for their fuel or whatever. But yeah, so he's going to get to go up, and he'll get like 5 or 10 minutes at the controls, and do all sorts of things. And I think he's going to be pretty. I know he's jazzed about it. So. And I apparently am already being slotted in to run this program next year. So I will. He'll continue to have opportunities to fly, and next year, I'm going to be teaching ground school. So we'll have that.
That's awesome.
My bad, yeah, it was pretty cool. My bad right now is the water temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. So it's been, from an American perspective, a fairly quiet hurricane season, though we're still fairly early. Right now is when it starts to really ramp up. But we're already on our 5th named storm, Tropical Storm Erin, that's out in the Atlantic. The reason it's been quiet from the U.S. perspective is they keep kind of hanging out in the Atlantic and then bending north and then not having any landfall. But early hurricanes tend to be out in the middle of the Atlantic middle season, and later tend to be more in the Gulf of Mexico. And like water temperatures off of Tampa. Tampa, for example, had its first 100-degree day in history the other day. And that may surprise you, but that's because historically there's been winds that blow in off of the ocean that help to kind of keep Tampa a little bit cooler. And the Gulf of Mexico, not a cold body of water, was at least cool enough to kind of keep it from breaking that 100-degree mark. That's not the case anymore. Like there's 93-degree water off of Tampa, it's like too hot to be in the water. And so one of the things that we've been kind of seeing in hurricane behavior, like the backstory on this is that I got kind of in my sailing days at the Naval Academy, like had a really scary incident with like kind of the remnants of Tropical Storm Allison, like back in like 2001. And, it just gave this fascination to me of like tropical weather. So I kind of have been following tropical weather as a hobby for years at this point. And one of the things I've been noticing is the idea that whenever a hurricane gets into the Gulf, it exceeds models for strengthening. And part of that is not just that the sea surface temperatures are warmer, but that the warm sea surface goes down further. So as a hurricane kind of moves across the water, it doesn't traditionally, if it doesn't move fast enough, it will churn up enough water that it gets colder water underneath and it starts to weaken itself, right? And so it's only like the fastest moving hurricanes that could really get super, relatively strong. But that's not the case anymore because we have such hot water and it goes so deep. And so I'm a little nervous about what's going to be happening in the next couple of hurricane seasons because the amount of heat that's in the Gulf is just extreme.
Yeah, that is scary. I mean, I think we ignore these things at our peril. It feels like, there's still a whole segment of our country that wants to just pretend like none of this is happening. Most of the rest of the world is paying attention and still moving. You mentioned Australia earlier. There's, more investment now in Australia, Europe. But I don't know. I think a lot of us have our heads in the sand.
Yep. And then speaking of heads in the sand, so the Supreme Court just picked up a case associated with same-sex marriage. And so a lot of people, kind of when they were voting for Trump, they thought that some of these questions had already been answered, that there was kind of no one that would be going back. It's worth remembering that same-sex marriage was made legal across the United States by a ruling from the Supreme Court about it being kind of an equal protection for gender component there. And so that the fact that the Supreme Court picked it back up gives a lot of people that are kind of paying attention to this a lot of cause for concern because normally the Supreme Court doesn't pick up another case like this unless it's willing to kind of make a ruling on it. And so my guess would be that the modification is that it goes back to being a states' rights issue. And I think that we're probably, my gut feeling is that we're probably going to see a lot of people lose marriage legitimacy in a lot of states across the country. And either the state courts are going to have to kind of step in and say that because this was ruled in the various states, because Alabama has a law, for example, Alabama probably had a law against same-sex marriage, but they've been also issuing now, post Obergefell, same-sex marriage licenses in Alabama now. And so what are they going to do with that? Is it going to be like the Air Force where they're going to be like, well, never mind, we're going to just take away your retirement, same thing. Oh, never mind, we're going to take away your marriage. Or is the Alabama Supreme Court going to, step in and say, no, this was a state issued permit, or marriage license, so it's a marriage license. I think it's going to fucking cause chaos. And I think there's going to be a lot of moving if that happens. But I don't know.
And why? And why? The Freedom Party keeps saying we want small government, we want government out of our lives, except in these most personal things like abortion and same-sex marriage. First of all, I thought same-sex marriage was solved. Nope. Who the fuck wants to go back to that? The Supreme Court did, to your point, they signaled this. If you read the majority opinion from when they overturned Roe versus Wade, they signaled that they were going to go do this. And so this is the follow through on that, which is what does it get us? Why are we legislating, making laws about how people want to live their lives? Every time I get into some of these debates with the more conservative friend, what they say back is the government should just get out of our lives. And my response is always, except in the most personal ways. You want the government in people's lives in the most personal ways. This doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. So, it's worth stating, the Supreme Court hasn't ruled this yet. They're just taking up the case. But so that's why it's an other for me is I kind of have this vision of where this is probably going, but I'm keeping an eye on it because we don't know for sure what's going to happen. I don't think that they, it's probably kind of a standard John Roberts, sort of scenario there, which is he does a half measure, which really actually kind of is the worst possible version of something there, and only walks it partially back, and which causes only more fucking confusion and distrust, and steps away from what fundamental rights are. So who knows where this is going, but I'm keeping an eye on it. For all my LGBTQ friends and listeners, like, I'm thinking of you. Well, that's, I think, kind of where we're at there. So that's it for this episode of Hardpoints. Thanks for listening and for being part of the conversation around energy, national security, and the startup world. If you found today's episode useful or thought-provoking, make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're feeling generous, share it on social media or send it to someone who might appreciate it. Thanks again for joining us. Hardpoints is produced by Jordan Caruso and brought to you by the Valor Media Network. We'll see you next time.